Let's talk Monty Williams. Let's open it up with that. So the reported details, at least that we know, it's 6 years, $78.5 million. Team options for an additional 2 years after that could get up to or over $100 million if he stays for 8 years. So that's a massive financial commitment from the Pistons. What are our thoughts on Monty Williams? How does it affect draft, free agency, anything like that? Just general open floor. Go ahead, Bryce.
Yeah, I mean, I'm the one that was like, I don't want to talk about the coaching hire. I don't care. We don't know anything about these guys. The thing with Monty Williams is we at least know a little bit, right? He's been a head coach in this league very recently, coached some good teams. And so there's at least reports and information on what does he do offensively? How does he handle young players? What he is his development? How does he interact with his players? So that I hope you need to get some sleep after this then, Gary. Like, I respect it, but then you need to get some sleep. That's good for the body. But no, I mean, it gives us something to talk about. It's exciting. I think what's really cool is like just the excitement that the fan base has now. It was just so sad after the way the season ended and how the lottery went. And now there's some excitement. And I can't help but think that played a little bit into Gores making sure this happened, because just look what Twitter did last night, guys. Jack, can you guys imagine what would have happened if they would have landed the number one pick in this lottery? Look what happened last night just hiring Monty Williams. So it's just really cool to have this much excitement going around.
Yeah, for sure. In many ways, it felt like the Pistons had won a playoff game or something last night. Like it was crazy. And just, you touched on it, Bryce, earlier, but just to jump back to like the beat reporters and people reporting on this, like, I know when I try and write an article, if I've got any adrenaline running through my system, like it is so hard. So I like that shout out there. But for me, man, like I touched on it earlier, I think landing Monty Williams it's significant, obviously, because he's a proven coach. He's been to the NBA Finals. I think in the past 3 seasons, he's the league's most winningest coach. So say what you want about the roster, but the facts are he is currently one of the league's top coaches. So just to get a guy like that to come to Detroit, shout out to Tom Gores. He's had his detractors and whatever, but for him to just throw, I believe, I could be wrong, it's the highest salary for a coach in history, maybe. Yeah, I might have to fact check that, but at least in the league right now, for him to go, stuff it, we're getting this guy, and give him an offer he can't refute. I think for Pistons fans, that should excite them for the future of this team as well, that their owner is willing to spend big to make things happen. And I think with Gores, since becoming the owner, he's always been a win now guy, and to the detriment of the franchise in the past decade, he's had to learn to take a step back. But I feel like right now, with where the franchise was sitting, his intent on making a big splash is really the right move for this team. And Williams is that coach. A lot of people wanted Kenny Atkinson or a coach to sort of help get the Pistons from the bottom to that competitive range. And I really feel like Monty Williams is the guy to do that. We saw what he did with the Suns in his first season. I believe Amari on the Pistons Pulse said just earlier that he took the Suns defense from bottom of the league to like 17th in his first season alone. So we'll dive into it more, but that's just my initial thoughts. It's a really exciting moment.
So I've been thinking about this, and I know there's questions around the way Tom Gores has made his money and all that. And I without getting into that, I know a lot of people like hate that Gores doesn't live in Detroit and those things. Part of me is like, I like what Tom Gores does as an owner in terms of when the money needs to be there, he puts the money up. I feel like he tries to make big name hires and those type of things. And then other than that, he's just not in the picture and he lets other people do their thing. Like, I kind of like that as an owner. I know like the other swing is Mark Cuban, who's sitting courtside, but I'm okay if my owner is essentially just the money guy, right? And I don't know all the details and intricacies of things, but just kind of big picture of who he is as the owner of the Pistons. That doesn't bother me. Wes, you guys are lifelong Pistons fans, though. Wes, you live in the area. Does that bother you a little bit more? I know we're a little off topic here, but I do think some of this is about Tom Gores. Does that ever bother you guys that he doesn't live in Detroit? He's not always there. He's a little more hands-off in general type of thing?
No, not me. I mean, I've liked that he's been hands off, and I think that he does probably the one main thing that other than the money that you need your owner to do, which is the only times he's stepped in on personnel decisions were to stop whoever the GM was from like making a mistake. So the big one from way back, Van Gundy was going to trade Andre Drummond for like Willie Cauley-Stein at 14 or something like that, and Tom Gores went, no, maybe don't do that. I think at the time it came out too that he helped a little bit with the Blake Griffin move. So like the only times he's ever stepped in on personnel were really big things that could have gone really poorly if it didn't play out an exact correct way. And other than that, he's just footed as much money as possible and otherwise pretty much stayed out of everything. So I've never really had a big issue with Tom Gores. I like the absent owner. I know Davidson was great before him though, and he was a little more active. So that was before my time mostly, but I really get it from more longtime Pistons fans that might have been used to something different.
I mean, I couldn't care less. He doesn't live in Detroit. I live in Australia. So. But no, I think it's a good question because I see a lot of stuff about that on Twitter. But the last thing I'll say on Gores is with these new CBA agreements coming in, I think this off season, the fact, I just think Pistons fans should be really excited about the prospect of Tom Gores putting his money where his mouth is in terms of spending into the tax. I don't think that will be a question for him if this team is worth paying into the tax. So I think fans should be excited. And there's Kyle confirming this offseason. And I believe, are you guys having Keith Smith on the Pistons Pulse soon?
Yeah.
So I'm sure you guys will break it all down there.
Keith will record with us live on Sunday and then next Wednesday when the podcast drops. And Kyle may correct me here. I think some of the super tax, or what actually Keith Smith has pegged as a super tax, is going to roll over time. Yeah. So some of those things they're going to slowly work in to give teams a chance not to be hamstrung them right off the bat. Like they're going to give them a chance. Right. So I think a lot of the things that are going to weigh are the super tax teams with what they are able to do when you go way over the cap. But yeah, Jack, I mean, I don't know. I think what you actually want your owner to do, Tom Gores does in terms of putting his money there. And like you say, Wes, stepping in some of the bigger decisions. You know, a lot of people didn't want Kevin Ollie. It sounded like that's who Troy Weaver wanted initially. And Gores may have said no or whatever. And then Gores put up the money to go get the guy that he wanted instead. And, you know, maybe a better hire in general. And if you guys saw me leave, I had to get tater tots out of the oven. And in 3 minutes and 8 seconds, I got to go get the burgers off the grill. Our family's all over the place right now, but I didn't want to miss this.
No, we appreciate you. I guess in terms of Monty Williams, what are your guys' thoughts on just how he can help this team day one? There's been a lot of chatter about the 0.5 offense. One of the things I noted from just going through and having a look at some of the play types and that in synergy was the Suns rarely ISO'd last season, isolation plays. That was right down the bottom. So in Monty's first season with the Suns as well, there's 11 play types synergy has. ISOs were dead last in his first season as coach. So I'm not saying we won't see isolations, but that was something Detroit featured a lot. And I just want to preface this by saying that's not all on Dwayne Casey. I think it's a personnel thing. But yeah, how do you guys think day one sort of Monty Williams helps his team?
Yeah, I just want to point out real quick that Dwayne Casey did want to run a read and react offense that was just flow, and it didn't. Now, here's the thing. And again, if you want to critique Dwayne Casey, there's an art to teaching players that, right? And demanding, and maybe Coach Casey, I don't know, but maybe he didn't do a good job of it. And it looks like Monty Williams does. But I just want to point out that that's something they've been trying to do, and it just wasn't very effective. And part of that, guys, is if you don't have players that can do it, it looks really, really bad. And so it's not an easy thing to do just to have a feel and play off one another when there's not a set rule on what happens. And so I do think there's going to be some rough possessions early in this thing. But no, I'm glad you went and looked at that synergy stuff, Jack, because I'm going to try to dive into it more tomorrow as well and just watch some of the field goal attempts and how the ball moves and all of those things. I think it's exciting. I think it'll be fun to watch. I'm interested to see how fast his teams played early on as well. I know there was a talk in these playoffs, Wes, when Chris Paul was playing, they played super slow. And one reason why they had some success when he was out was because he wasn't there and Shaman or whoever was pushing the ball a little bit more.
No, I think this is going to be a really, really little thing, but day one, there's not a whole load up where he's implementing a bunch of sets or systems, right? So I think day one, honestly, the most important thing he's going to bring is just a different voice in the locker room, different leadership style. It's kind of a fresh start for a lot of these young guys. And I'm not saying like Dwayne Casey did a bad job. I was a noted Casey supporter for a long time, but just when you get this kind of changing of the guard, changing of leadership, it can rejuvenate some guys. And I think that is going to have a pretty big impact. Like literally the moment he walks through the facility doors and starts talking to guys and getting their vibe on what their expectations are going to be moving forward. So I know it's a really little thing. I'm not trying to give like a cop out answer, but I think that could have a really big impact, especially on some of the 22 and unders on the roster.
I think that's an excellent point, Wes, and something else we spoke about, literally before hopping on and spoken about in the past, is just the pressure in the early going, just how an established coach like Monty Williams will be able to, if this team does get off to a bit of a slower start, obviously a 6-year contract helps as well, but Monty Williams has done this. He's been a coach for a decade plus. He's been a player in the NBA. He can handle the pressure and scrutiny that maybe a first-time head coach would really struggle with. So I think that helps, and I just think he's clearly a born leader. The players will respect him, and having a new voice, and for a lot of these guys, just a new coach and a new voice, new energy. I think that's a really good point to raise.